Now bring in Orwa Ajjoub, Syria analyst at the Department of Global Political Studies at Malmo University. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Now, Ahmed al-Shara says he wants an inclusive Syria. So why does the Syrian Druze community feel under threat?
I think that's the big question here is since the new government came to power in December, they tried to reach to minorities, whether in Kurdish minorities, Druze minorities, to find a way that allowed Damascus to pose its central control over the region. However, with the Sweida, there was one particular group that led by Al-Hajri, who is a religious figure who has great influence over a certain amount of people there. And they rejected the government, citing that the government has not been inclusive enough, and the government basically composition that is made basically on Sunni majority, close to HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the original group that made it to Damascus, raised concerns among these circles, and especially after March, when the militias or like factions affiliated with the government forces, they committed crimes against Alawites in the coast, that raised concerns among many in the Druze community, in the Druze areas, that any reconciliation with this government needs to be based on political process and political inclusion, rather than just allowing them to enter the city and post control. For them, they see the state is in a fragile period because it's still a fresh one and it's seeking to build alliances. So for them, they want more assurances and guarantees that the government will control its own violence, as opposed to what happened in the coast in March.
So how did the Druze community in Syria do under Bashar al-Assad?
I think the Druze community is a very unique case. For a long period of time, they stayed neutral. So they refused to join the army, to send their men to the army, but also they refused also to fight the regime. However, the last couple of years or throughout the conflict, there was episodes of Suwayda revolting against the regime and seeking independence. And especially the last couple of years, there was huge demonstrations antagonizing the regime, asking for the fall of the regime, and also for the expulsion of the Russian and Iranians.
You heard there from our correspondent Noga in Jerusalem, the view of Ahmed al-Shara, once a jihadist, always a jihadist. Now al-Shara is promising to protect the Druze minority. Will the company he keeps fall in line?
I mean, it's a big question, and this question not only has to do with different issues, not only for the Druze community. So, for example, when it comes to democratic process, Syria still has to balance and tread the thin line between his support base, majority of which are very sensitive to the word democracy itself, and also the Syrian, the rest of the Syrian society and the Western expectation that's asking him for much democratic process. So now it's a difficult challenge for al-Shara. On the one hand, he wants to justify the hundreds of people who were killed for basically achieving nothing in Sweida. But on the other hand, he needs to tell everyone that he has achieved a victory, or he will retaliate for these people who have been killed.
I know the Syrian Jews community is quite fractured, but then why do some within it look to Israel for protection?
I think this is a complex issue, because if you think about the Druze community, it spreads across three different countries: Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. And what has happened recently is that there was it seems there was a clear connection between Al-Hajri, a man who opposed the government since day one, and another religious figure in Israel who is the head of the Druze in Israel, Sheikh Tarifi. And it seems that there was some sort of communication about this. Al-Hajri refusal for accepting Damascus monopoly over power in the region was in a way encouraged by his connection to the leader of the Druze in Israel, who probably had the promise promised that Israel will intervene in case the government advanced into the Druze areas. However, I think the government was hasty in its intervention in the way they dealt with it, because I mean, it was not well calculated. At the end of the day, definitely there was a better solution for this crisis between Sweida and between Damascus. But what we saw is that basically the government rushing for a solution, the government instead, as you reported said at the beginning, instead of taking a neutral role between the Bedouins and the Druze themselves, the government sided with the Druze, and it has been also seeking to disarm the Druze, not the Bedouin. So I think that was also what created this tension and pushed many in Suwayda who were supportive of the government to align with Al-Hijri now, who was, sidelined by them.
Israel says it acted in Syria in order to protect the Druze. But I'm just curious, how does the wider Syrian population view Israel's actions? Yesterday they targeted the defense ministry not once but twice. Then they struck near the presidential palace. What are people saying?
I think Israel's policy is very dangerous in Syria. I mean, if it aims to support the Druze, it definitely has done the opposite. If you think about it now, many in the Syrian society, especially those aligned with the government, they start to call the Druze community as traitors because they solicited Israel's support against their own people. So I think Israel did the opposite if it sought to protect the Druze community. On the other hand, I don't think by protecting the Syrian Druze, you kill other Syrians, right? So we have a number of Syrian civilians and also security forces who have been killed through the Israeli strike. And also it's an outrageous attack on the Syrian sovereignty, especially that the Syrian government has been trying, behind the closed doors and also explicitly trying to build bridges, not necessarily to achieve normalization with Israel, but at least to reach a security agreement that stop Israel from attacking Syria on a weekly basis.
Orwa, you know this, that any clash in Syria, especially the sectarian clashes we've seen, things can escalate very quickly. I mean, in the past few days, according to monitors, some 516 people were killed, and we saw Israel step in to help. The Druze, they say. Are you confident this ceasefire, which we have now, will hold, or could it risk unraveling very quickly as well?
I think the ceasefire could hold, but the issue here is the grievances that have been generated or that's coming out of this latest spat of violence, because at the end of the day, people have lost their dear ones. They have lost their sons, their dear friends, their families. And I think it will be so difficult to recover from this for many Syrians. However, I still see an opportunity here, because if you look at the surface level is basically the government intervened to mediate between Druze and Bedouin. However, on the deeper level, the issue here has to do with the government's lack of inclusion, the government lacks of ability to construct a new social contract between the concerned Druze. Many of them saw what happened in the coast, and they are now asking for guarantees. And also, the last thing is basically that if you want Syrians, including especially minorities, to trust the new government and allow the new government to have some sort of central power structure, the state needs to regulate its own violence. As we saw, the states or those affiliated with the state have committed crimes against Alawites and against the Druze. So if you want them to, if you want the Druze community and other communities to accept the new state must control its own violence before asking other people to accept this violence as a legitimate one.
Orwa Ajjoub, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today.